I call this meeting to order. Bonjour à tous. Everyone looks so very far away with the new rules. So, I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number...
My apologies. Just a brief point of order. We just started a little bit late. I'm hoping that we've got the full 2 hours with Ms. Tate, if she's kind enough to stay for the full 2 hours.
Yes, we have the full 2 hours.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyway, welcome to meeting number 118 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage. I want to acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin and Ishabi people. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motions adopted by the committee on December the 7th, 2023 and March 19th, 2024, the committee is resuming its study of job cuts announced at CBC Radio-Canada. Before we begin, I want to remind all members and other meeting participants in the room of the following preventative procedures. To prevent disruptive and potentially harmful audio feedback incidents that can cause injuries, all in-person participants are reminded to keep their earpieces away from all microphones at all times. As indicated in the communique from the Speaker's office to all members on Monday, the following measures have been taken to help prevent audio feedback incidents. All earpieces have been replaced by a new model which reduces the possibility of feedback. The new earpieces are black, whereas the former earpieces were gray, and please only use a black-approved earpiece. By default, all unused earpieces will be unplugged at the beginning of the meeting. When you're not using your earpiece, please place it face down on the middle of the sticker for this purpose that you will find on the table. There's a little round sticker with a funny-looking thing that I think is a representative of an earpiece. So put it face down on that sticker, please, when you're not using it. Please consult the cards on the table for guidelines to prevent audio feedback injury incidents. And there's a little card here called Guidelines for Meeting Participants. The room layout has been adjusted to increase the distance between microphones and reduce the chance of feedback from an ambient earpiece. These measures are in place so we can conduct our business without interruption and protect the health and safety of all participants, including the interpreters, because we have had some serious incidents with interpreters with regard to this issue. Now, we have today... I want to make a few comments for the benefits of members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. Please go through the chair when you're asking or answering questions. For members in the room, please raise your hand if you wish to speak. For members on Zoom, please raise your hands in the chat room. Now, I would like to recommend our witnesses. Welcome once again, Ms. Tate, Catherine Tate, who is President and Chief Executive Officer of CBC Radio-Canada, Marco Dubert, Chief Transformation Officer and Executive Vice President, People and Culture. Now, Ms. Tate will have up to 5 minutes for opening remarks, after which we will proceed with rounds of questions. Ms. Tate, I think you know how this works. Somebody's going to ask you a question, and depending on what that round is, we're going to tell you how much time everyone has for questions and answers. So, thank you. I invite you, Ms. Tate, to begin your remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm pleased to be here to provide an update on CBC Radio-Canada to the committee. We shared with you a letter back in March to clarify the facts about our financial situation. Since then, our financial outlook has improved. Last December's estimated shortfall of $125 million for fiscal 2024-25 has been reduced to about $20 million. This reduction is due to steps we have taken, including significant cuts to our operational costs, the elimination of 205 vacant positions and 141 occupied positions, and the additional $42 million investment in the recent federal budget. This will allow us to maintain our services and to manage this year without further job cuts to balance our budget. But to be clear, We are not out of the woods. You have heard it from other witnesses. All Canadian media organizations face serious challenges from a digital world ruled by global players who simply do not share the same commitment to our country's interests. Voilà ce qui devrait retenir l'attention du comité aujourd'hui.
I believe this is what this committee should consider today. How will we support our own media ecosystem here in Canada when the dominant players are leveraging global revenues with little regard for the needs of our local communities? We saw it last summer when Meta blocked Canadian news in the middle of a national fire emergency, when communities facing evacuation needed up-to-date information.
More and more time on digital platforms. Canadian media, broadcasters, and newspapers are subject to laws, regulation, as well as established standards of accuracy, impartiality, and balance. Foreign digital platforms operate in Canada without any of these obligations. And there's another problem. The more time Canadians spend on foreign platforms, the less they are finding about their own country, the challenges we share, the things we have in common. That mutual understanding is the glue that keeps societies together. We believe the role for the public broadcaster is to connect Canadians, to ensure they know what's going on in their communities and across the country. I'd like to quickly give you just a few examples of what CBC Radio-Canada does to strengthen these national conversations. Our presence in communities means we share local stories with the entire country. We've been shifting resources to expand that presence to places like Kingston, Nanaimo, Grand Prairie, and Lethbridge. It's a start, but there are still 35 communities with populations of over 50,000 which don't have a local CBC Radio-Canada presence. Nous présentons des grands événements.
We present big nation-building events like the Olympics and Paralympics, the Junos, and Les Gémeaux. These events bring Canadians together in the millions, and they showcase the incredible talent we have in this country.
To reaching young Canadians and newcomers where they are. That's why we launched CoLab, our partnership with hundreds of libraries across the country. We host media literacy programs, teach podcasting and video production, and introduce new audiences to Canadian music, books, and other great programming. We're the only media in Canada offering children kids' news in both English and French, on digital, on TikTok, YouTube, and in the classroom. It helps them decipher their world, learn how to develop digital smarts, and critical thinking about the news. Nous présentons des contenus qui reflètent.
We showcase uniquely Canadian stories. Like I Knew on Radio-Canada is winning praise for its portrayal of Montreal's Haitian-Canadian community. Bones of Crows is the first Indigenous drama in the history of television produced in English, French, and Cree. Still Standing
Towns they may never have heard of, and shows us how much we all have in common. No one else does this. And just this morning, we announced our latest project, the Public Spaces Incubator, a first-ever collaboration between 4 public broadcasters.
Can you please wrap up, Ms. Tate? Your time is up.
To develop solutions to make online conversations safer for all of us. Our focus is simple: keep Canadians informed, build trust in public institutions, strengthen democracy, protect and promote Canadian culture. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we begin the question round, and we start with the Conservatives for a 6-minute round. The 6-minute includes the questions and the answers. Starting with Ms. Thomas for the Conservatives for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you. Ms. Tate, in December on the 4th, you announced that 800 jobs would be cut from the CBC, 600 individuals would be fired, and 200 vacancies would not be filled, totaling 800. At that time, you were asked whether or not executives would be given bonuses for 2023. You said you weren't ruling it out. When you came to this committee, you have confirmed once again that you were not ruling it out. In fact, you confirmed that a decision would be made by the end of March. Now it's May, and so I'm curious. Are you going to be awarded a bonus for 2023?
As I said at the time, Madam Chair, as I said at the time, we have a process which is very rigorous. After internal deliberations with the Board of Directors at our June board meeting, once we've had a chance to present the audited financial statements, there will be a discussion, and we will inform employees at that time of the decision that is taken.
Ms. Tate, an access to information was put forward by the Taxpayers Federation and asking for those 2023 bonus amounts. The CBC responded by saying that they would provide those, but not until May 10th. Today is May 7th, and so I'm curious if 3 days prior you would be able to give those numbers here. I'm sure you have them. You just have not agreed to release the documents yet. However, I did write you a letter. I gave you a heads up, so I'm curious if you'd share them here.
And I thank you. I thank the honourable member from Lethbridge for the opportunity to clarify a lot of misinformation that has been circulating regarding performance pay in 22-23. To be
Ms.
clear,
Tate, sorry,
CBC Radio-Canada...
I think there might have been a misunderstanding. I'm not asking about 2022. I'm asking about 2023.
The fiscal year 23-24?
I'm asking about the fiscal year 2023. That decision with regard to bonuses was made in March. Those are your words. You
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Decisions would be made.
Madam Chair, just for clarification, is Ms. Thomas asking about the fiscal year 22-23 or 23-24, just so that for avoidance of doubt?
It's not a point of order.
That's not a point of order, Madam Chair.
But I think he's clarifying the question, so it's a point of clarification. I think Ms. Tate wishes to know what year you're referring to. Years go
I
from
trust my
one
time
year
has
to
stopped.
another, April to April.
I trust my time was stopped.
Yes, the time is stopped.
Thank you. I'm referring to the fiscal year of 2023, which ended in March of 2024.
So that's actually the fiscal year of 23-24, and for that year, we have not issued any performance pay because we have not yet reviewed the final results of the year that ended on March 31st, 24.
So, Ms. Tate, you are head of the management team. You confirmed at our last committee meeting that it is you and your management team that make that decision with regards to bonuses that are given out. You confirmed that that decision is made at the by no later than the end of March of 2024. And you then made the comment that the board would have to sign off on that recommendation in June. So I understand that the sign-off is coming up, but you do know what the recommendation is. So as of the end of March of 2024, what is the recommendation for your 2023 bonus?
As I've said previously, these conversations are subject to internal deliberations by the management team to the Board of Directors. We have not had that conversation with the Board. That is scheduled for June 12th and 13th. We will have that conversation, at which point the final results will have been audited and reviewed by the Auditor General. We don't simply precipitously announce results when we haven't had the privilege of the auditor and our internal audit process. So those final results are being assembled right now, and they will be made available
Ms. Tate, have you been assigned a bonus for 2023? I realize the board hasn't signed off on it, but have you been assigned a bonus for 2023?
No, I have not.
You have not been assigned a bonus for 2023?
I have not.
So for 2023, there is no bonus coming your way?
I do not know that I have a bonus because the process, as we have described, for governor and council positions is separate from performance pay. My process is that I will be evaluated by the Board of Directors. A letter of recommendation will go to the government, and the government will reflect upon whether or not I or other appointees would receive any performance pay.
Has the board package for that June meeting gone out?
No.
No. Okay, because you are a member of that board.
I am.
So you not only have a say with regard to bonuses for the top executives, yourself included, you have a say not only in March when you're a member of the management team, the most senior member of the management team, but then you get a second say at the board level. So with all due respect, you do have a fair bit of power in terms of bonuses. So I'll ask again, will you be up for a bonus in the consideration at the board meeting in June?
As I've said previously, this is part of an internal deliberation. It's an HR function, and we have to be respectful of the governance that rules the CBC Radio-Canada.
But you do know the answer.
I absolutely do not know the answer until I've had those deliberations with the board of directors. I cannot preemptively say what the results of a future conversation will be.
Sure,
39
but you know what the
seconds.
recommendation is. You know what the recommendation is going forward to the board.
I think I've repeated myself enough to say these are matters that concern the organization that operates at arm's length like all Crown corporations, and I have to be respectful.
You did confirm that you are the senior member of the management team, which makes the decisions, and then those decisions get recommended to the board, which you are a member of the board. Therefore, you have access to information.
Point of order,
on 2
Madam Chair.
points and
Madam
access
Chair,
to
this question has been asked, I think, 6 times now.
I was about to mention that I think the question has been clearly asked and the answers have been clearly given. And so I think Ms. Thomas has got, she's got literally about 2 seconds left. Finish.
So, Chair, I just point of I guess response to the point of order, since you're ruling it in favor. I just want to be sure then, no repeat questions are permitted at this table is the ruling of the chair?
I don't think that was what the member suggested. I think he suggested that the question had been repeated over and over.
Okay.
The witness
what
had
is an
answered
appropriate
over
number
and
to
over,
repeat
and
the
it was
question?
getting to be repetitious because the question was the same and the answers were exactly the
Thank
same.
you. Point of order,
Thank
Chair.
you.
I'm just looking for a ruling. What would be the number of times that would be appropriate to repeat a question?
There is no set number of times,
Okay.
but as a chair,
Thank you,
I may
Chair.
decide
Thank you,
on
Chair.
how the meeting
Thank
moves
you, Chair.
forward.
There is
and
no
allow me to
appropriate
finish
number.
speaking, Ms. Thomas. Thank you. Now, I go to the next person with the Liberals, is Patricia Latanzio. Ms. Latanzio, 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome, Monsieur Dubé and Ms. Tate, to our committee. Ms. Tate, I'm going to just read off a paragraph from the motion that was adopted from this committee to be able to undergo this study. So it says, pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee invites CEO of CBC Radio-Canada, Catherine Tate, to appear for no less than 2 hours on April 9 to answer questions concerning the first bullet, the increase in funding to the public broadcaster of nearly $100 million per year. Can you tell us, Ms. Tate, what does the nearly $100 million noted in this motion represent?
This is the sum of money that was awarded in the main estimates, and it is from Treasury Board a sum of money that corresponds to salary increases related to inflation. So it's salary inflation funding, which all government departments and crowns receive. So it's not incremental new funding. This happens every 2 to 3 years.
And would the sum of $100 million be consistent with past years?
Yes.
Yes. Now, with regards to bonuses, I just want to maybe have a clearer understanding. In your opinion, is there a difference between the terms bonus and performance pay? Or are they just the same or different? One just sounds fancier than the other. Can you explain?
Thank you for the question. It has been a point of great frustration that this committee or some members of this committee refer to performance pay as a bonus. A bonus, in my mind, is something that is given out on a discretionary basis. Performance pay is a part of the total compensation of an individual that is contracted or agreed upon at the beginning of their employment. So, for example, if I can give a very mathematical example, if you are earning $80,000 and your performance pay is 10% of your $80,000, that means that you're paid $72,000 until the end of year when we review targets, key performance indicators, and your performance, at which point you're paid out that amount of money. In the current environment, pretty well all federal agencies, departments, crown corporations, and certainly the private sector use this performance pay as a way to incentivize and retain talent. If we were to eliminate performance pay at CBC Radio-Canada, we would no longer be competitive in attracting talent to the organization. So it would create quite an obstacle for us.
So my understanding is that your legal risks, I'd like to hear what would be the legal risks if you were to, let's say, opt to arbitrarily cut the performance pays.
Well, just to imagine, we have 1,180 odd employees that receive this performance pay. If we were to decide to eliminate it unilaterally, after a year where we achieved our performance indicators and our targets, we would be basically in a situation of constructive dismissal, given that those people would have performed the work of the previous 12 months. So it does pose a legal risk. But more importantly, it poses a motivation risk. If people do not have this incentive, we know that it is a big driver in the company.
Okay. And is the performance pay noted in today's motion? That's something that you've previously discussed before this committee. Is it something that was changed, with regards to your last appearance? Has that undergone?
No. That, in fact, performance pay has been part of the compensation regime at CBC Radio-Canada for close to 20 years, like many of our colleagues, other crown corporations and government departments. So there's nothing new under the sun here. And if I may just correct the record, because there has been information circulated that we paid out performance pay knowing that we were going to announce, or after we announced cuts, is simply untrue. Performance pay for the fiscal year 22-23 was paid out in July 2023. We have not as yet paid out or even decided on performance pay for the year ending 23-24, just to clarify the record.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. And is the performance pay in question presumably based on key performance indicators established at the start of the year relevant to non-unionized staff at CBC Radio Canada? And if so, what are some of the examples of the roles this issue has in terms of consequences and impacts?
So, yes, when we will meet with the board in June, we will also discuss the KPIs for the next fiscal year, the current 24-25 year. And the board approves those KPIs. Those KPIs are based on an analysis of what's going on in the industry and also stretch targets for the non-union employees or unaffiliated employees in the corporation. So those, as you know, can be as numbers such as employment equity. It can be reach, digital reach. What we know is that these drivers do impact employees' performance and managers' performance.
Okay. On a different topic, when the Board of Directors looks into options for the viability of the corporation, as we saw and was reported in La Presse last week, is this a normal threat and opportunity assessment by the Board of Directors, in your opinion?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, every media company in the country
15 seconds, please.
is looking at ways to combat the digital giants. And the Board of Directors, I believe, was acting very responsibly in asking management to prepare what we called a transformation plan, but which is really a reflection on options for the corporation to better prepare for a digital future and enormous competition.
Very much. I now go to the Bloc Québécois. Martin Champoux. Martin, you have 6 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente, Madame Tate, Monsieur Dubé.
Thank you, Ms. Tate, Monsieur Dubé, Ms. Tate. When you last appeared, you talked about the financial situation of CBC Radio-Canada. You also stated that if the situation improved, you could review the decision to eliminate 600 positions. equally between French and English services, which caused quite a reaction. You've shared the current state of things, thanks to the exemption and additional funding and the $7 million that you will be receiving through the agreement with Google. And so the situation seems to be resolved according to what you've stated. Are job cuts still happening, or will you remove this sword that's hanging over the employees? Thanks to the improved situation, we can say that for now, we will stop with the cuts and we will reinvest in independent content as well. Radio-Canada's union, Monsieur Tousignan and Madame Runel, recently and this week stated that they were looking for answers. There were 346 job cuts between now and December 2023, and they wanted information. Is this part of the announcements that you had made? And was it done using the same ratio that you had proposed? They haven't received a response. What can you tell them today? I would ask Ms. Marco Dubé to give details, please. What we can say is that most of those positions were vacant, and so we limited the number of layoffs. We laid off twice as many managers as unionized workers, and of those 346 positions, there were a few more at CBC than at Radio-Canada. So the concern, or rather the financial situation improved, and we are very happy with that. Monsieur Dubé, I'm not going to ask for more information on those positions, but on behalf of this committee, I would like to have these details. If you could send these to us in writing after the meeting, that would be great. Ms. Tate, this week we learned that the board of CBC Radio-Canada is trying to look at a different formula to take on the digital giants and the new markets that broadcasters have to face in Quebec and Canada. And when we talk about making CBC and Radio-Canada closer, you can expect Quebec to be concerned. It doesn't seem to make sense. I think it was during your previous testimony you explained that CBC Radio-Canada shared infrastructure, buildings, technology, equipment, administration, funding. You stated that CBC Radio-Canada is one entity except for news and content. For programming and content. You're talking about making CBC and Radio-Canada closer, but how are you going to do that? We're facing a digital shift. So yes, we're talking about equipment and the tools that we have for production and distribution, but the most important thing is what can we do to compete with these digital giants for these investments? So we're talking about platforms. For example, I was in Winnipeg for the launch of our new Indigenous strategy, and I met people who worked at the Radio-Canada station who worked next door to the people from CBC, and they asked, Ms. Tate, will there eventually be the same platform for us? Because they have two different systems. But you might understand that the way the two entities were managed, well, nothing supported Quebec's culture. Nothing seemed to highlight this cultural difference. And it's concerning when you talk about bringing the two even closer together. And if you will allow me these comments, it's not unheard of that you try to protect CBC against a conservative government that has threatened to cut CBC. And this is the same company, and so what happens to CBC would happen to Radio-Canada. And so you could take from Radio-Canada to try to save CBC. Answer: that's not the case. I can assure you that that's not the case. The editorial independence of Radio-Canada and CBC is a fundamental principle of our services. And we invested in Radio-Canada. We invested heavily in order to strengthen what we do at Radio-Canada. And so I promise that Radio-Canada's strength and its importance is at the heart of what we're doing.
Now go to the New Democrats, Nikki Ashton. Nikki, for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Executive bonuses, layoffs of workers, cuts to local broadcasting, the use and abuse of non-disclosure agreements to silence, intimidate employees. Canadians may be wondering if we're talking about a major media conglomerate, perhaps Bell Media. But no, we're talking about the publicly funded CBC. To many Canadians, the CBC, an institution we have built, is increasingly acting like a private corporation, putting profit ahead of everything else. We are aware in recent months about the back and forth on whether or not CBC executives, like yourself, Ms. Tate, will be taking a bonus. Potentially $15 million spent on executive bonuses while jobs disappear is wildly irresponsible. Rewarding oneself for failure while families and communities pay the price of job losses and loss of local programming is unacceptable. Will you commit to canceling executive bonuses to save as many jobs as possible?
I believe I've answered this question already, Madam Chair. The consideration on performance pay will be deliberated at our next board meeting. And if I may, cutting salaries does not. Sorry.
You've already answered the question. I'll move on to my next one. Madam Tate, you've talked about allowing communities to tell their stories. Sadly, that's not the case here in northern Manitoba. Our trailblazing CBC station, North Country, is empty because the CBC has utterly failed to fill the position in a long-term capacity over a number of years. This means that 85,000 people living in First Nations and northern communities across our region do not have CBC local programming, contributing to our existence as a media desert. We've been left with the occasional reporter sent in from Winnipeg as part of your pop-up initiatives. Ms. Tate, we are not a tourist destination. We are Canadians who deserve local programming in the CBC and the reopening of our local CBC station. The CBC has an obligation, including through the CRTC, to our station and local programming. When will the CBC live up to its mandate, including CRTC obligations, and what are you going to do to reinstate local programming, staff up our CBC station here in northern Manitoba?
Well, I'm really delighted to be able to break the news that we, after many, many months of posting the job in Thompson, Manitoba, have in fact identified a journalist who will be reporting from Thompson I believe, in the coming weeks. I checked in with our head of that presence. And just to be clear, during a period of looking at job reductions, we kept the regional position open in Manitoba because we believe, like you, how important it is. That's why we've opened bureaus in Nanaimo and other places.
I'll stop you right there. That is music to my ears that you have finally hired somebody after this many years. Appreciate the good news being shared. It goes also to show that public pressure works, and very much looking forward to this person starting up and obviously getting the full support of the CBC, particularly CBC Manitoba support. We haven't seen the way we've needed to, or certainly our reporters have needed to in the past. I want to quickly move move to another question. When the committee decided to bring you back, multiple former employees reached out to my office to discuss their mistreatment while working at the CBC. Not one of the many people that reached out to me was willing to speak on the record due to the use and abuse of non-disclosure agreements and non-disparagement agreements, that especially when it comes to harassment. Agreements that we've been told CBC requires employees to sign before they would even investigate. As a result, I'll have to be somewhat vague in order to protect the identities of the people that reached out. Each person that reached out were recognized as excelling in their field. Not one of them had a good thing to say about how their time at the CBC ended. They all said that things got worse since you took over. Many of them mentioned directly appraising you of the situation, but nothing changed. Can you describe CBC's policies on non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreements? And are you aware of instances where the CBC has investigated a claim of harassment where the CBC did not rely on a non-disclosure or non-disparagement agreement before starting the investigation?
If I may just start, but I will have to ask Marco Dubé to get into the details because I do not get involved, obviously, in direct personnel matters. But I am deeply disturbed by what you are saying, and I will absolutely take it to heart. This is news to me, and so I will certainly take it very seriously. But maybe Marco can answer the questions.
And just to reiterate, what we are looking for is the CBC aware of an investigation of a claim of harassment where CBC did not rely on the use of a non-disclosure or non-disparagement agreement before starting the investigation? And I will say, Ms. Tate, we are aware of instances where former employees did raise this directly with you years ago, and nothing was done.
Thank you for your question.
38 seconds.
Yeah, so I'll simplify and summarize. We take very seriously all allegations of harassment and violence in the workplace. We assess those claims. We investigate those claims with external investigators. There are rules around those investigations that are regulated, and there's a law actually that we have to follow in the labor code, and we do all of that respectfully, and we try along the way to protect the victims of those events, and certainly we try to protect along the way the confidentiality of people.
Where an NDA was not used in investigating harassment? That's the question I asked.
I'm sorry. It's now up, which is a 5-minute round, and we begin for the Conservatives with Rachel Thomas for 5 minutes. Ms. Thomas.
Ms. Tate, at our previous committee meeting on January 30th, you confirmed that you are at the decision-making table with regard to bonuses. In fact, I'll quote you directly. You said, they make that decision based on the data that we present to them. In other words, the board makes a decision with regards to bonuses. They sign off on them based on the information that we, your management team, which you are the executive leader of, yes, make to them. So ultimately then, you have a voice at the management table and you have a voice at the board table. You have 2 places where you get to speak to whether or not the top 8 executives of the CBC get a bonus and how much. You are one of those top 8. Ms. Tate, what is the recommendation that went forward with regard to the bonuses for the top 8 executives for the 2023 fiscal year?
I really am sorry to seem difficult here, but the 22-23 year has already passed.
I
this
didn't
year,
ask about that.
So for 23-24,
I'm asking for the 2023
24
fiscal
year.
Sure, you can include those 3 extra months in 24.
That's our fiscal year. It ends at the end of March 24. So for the 23-24, no recommendation has been prepared as yet. We are still reviewing our final results. We are a large corporation, $1.8 billion. A lot of data has to be reviewed, financials have to be audited, and KPIs have to be assessed and evaluated. All of that package goes to the board in June, in mid-June, at which point we will discuss it. And by the way, I am not part of that 8. I am separate as a governor and council appointee. I do not participate in the performance pay that the other executives participate in.
Okay, I can appreciate that. Either you lied on January 30th or you're lying now. And the reason being is because I'll quote back the words that you used at that time. You said, quote, "At the end of the fiscal year, which will be the end of March 2024, the board of directors will decide." So in other words, at the end of March 2024, which has now passed, it's May 7th, there would be a decision that is made. Now you just told me no decision has yet been made.
I really take objection to being called a liar, which has happened several times. It is, I really, Madam Chair, this is not the first time that I have been called a liar by certain members of this committee, and it actually is the first time in a 40-year career that anybody has ever addressed me in this way. So I want to make a personal objection. Having said that, I made it clear that at the board meeting following the end of the fiscal year, we would be reviewing the results for the fiscal year. That meeting is always held in June. It gives us the time to review all the results, to get them audited, and to prepare the package in English and in French for the board of directors. This is a very large corporation. We do not do this overnight.
So, Ms. Tate, there are two discrepancies here. One, I'm looking at your website and it says senior executive team, and your picture is showing there. So you are one of the members of the senior executive team. So point of clarification there. And two, I am reading your direct quote where you say that bonus decisions will be made in March of 2024. And now you're saying to this committee, no, those decisions haven't been made.
Not been made. They will be made.
So then why did you tell us on June 30th that they would be made in March then?
Because it's
You're
the end
either
of the
misleading
fiscal.
us now
I
or
am
you
not
misled us
misleading
then.
you. I am not misleading you. I said at the end of the fiscal year, and
I
when the
just read it to
board
you.
meets after the end of the fiscal year.
So, Ms. Tate,
We're talking semantics
Ms.
here.
Tate, have you made recommendations with your management team as to whether or not the 8 top executives get bonuses for the 2023-2024 fiscal year?
We have not.
No recommendations have been made.
No, we have not.
When will those recommendations be made?
At the June board meeting.
So by the board, management team will have nothing to do with the
No,
recommendation?
we will present the results. We will present the results
Okay.
of the financial year and the results of the KPIs, and we will have an opportunity to discuss them, and the HRGC, which is the Human Resources and Governance Committee, will review them,
Thank you.
and they will make their recommendation
and your
to the board.
management team has had that
13
discussion,
seconds.
yes?
No, not as yet.
Wow, okay. So your information then provided on January 30th was not correct because you told us that that decision would be made by your management team by the end of March of 2024. And now you're telling us on May 7th that you have not yet
I'm
had that
afraid the
conversation,
time is up.
which points to great incompetence.
I'm afraid the time is up. And I would like to remind members of this committee that we are a parliamentary committee and that we need to behave with a certain amount of respect towards each other and witnesses. It is my job as chair to ensure that that happens. So I would just mention that again so that everyone can be warned about choosing the language they use when they speak to or ask witnesses questions or speak to each other. Thank you. To the next person up, who is for the Liberals, Michael Coteau. Mr. Coteau, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. Do appreciate you being here, and I want to pick up from where I started last time when you were here, just to say that I did disagree with the current. The current system that was in place to provide bonuses, just because of the the place the country is in, and I did make reference to the fact that I didn't think it was aligned with where Canadians were. Having said that, though, I think that I'm glad that the budget is providing more resources once if the budget is passed in Parliament, more resources to mitigate some of the job losses that are there. I said this before, I'm a big supporter of the CBC. I support the work you do as an organization. I think it's an important thing for Canadians. I think projects our values as Canadians. It keeps us as a country It doesn't allow big corporate dollars to influence public news, which I think is a good thing. And I also think it's good for democracy, having a public broadcaster. So I do appreciate the work that you do. I think it's obvious, what we're seeing from the Conservatives. And again, despite my objections to the bonus piece, I want to talk about the CBC as a whole. It's obvious that the Conservatives, they want to defund the CBC. There's more to these questions than just the bonuses. It's about defunding the CBC. The leader of the Conservatives, the members on the opposite side have said time after time that they would defund the organization. It's very clear. The previous leader said the same thing. And I think that's what Canadians have to realize what's at play here when it comes to the constant attacks towards CBC. Bonuses aside. So I wanted to say that because I think it's important for people to know that despite the rhetoric that's coming from the table and, that there are many Canadians that support the CBC. So thank you for the work you do. Now, I think you have opportunity in front of you to revisit perhaps bonus structures in the future. Do you think that there may be an opportunity in this June meeting, once the actual bonuses have been issued, to actually start a conversation about what that structure will look like the following fiscal year, so 24-25?
We work with thank you for the question. We work with a Mercer Consulting, which a pay expert company, compensation experts. And every year we review the tools and the industry standards and norms to make sure that we are aligned with other members of either the media industry or other crown corporations so that we're not out of step. And we try to peg our compensation at about the 50 percentile. So we're not paying more, we're actually at the 50th percentile.
So you're saying, I apologize for interrupting, I got a minute and a half left. You're saying that the structure that you have in place today is aligned with the other big broadcasters, both in Canada and maybe the United States, or just Canada?
We only look at Canada.
At Canada,
yes.
And you're about halfway at the 50 percentile?
Correct.
Okay.
And if I may answer the rest of your question, with respect to looking at other models, we have asked that Mercer to look at other models because obviously we've been paying attention to the concerns not just of this committee but others in the, from external critics or commentators. So we're not tone deaf.
Yeah. So
we're
I
paying
hope
attention.
that maybe when that conversation comes up again at the June meeting, you can look at revisit because you may be in a similar situation in the upcoming fiscal where you're going to have to make some adjustments. So please provide that flexibility if possible. I've got 50 seconds left. Any updates on anything that's happening to support young people through the CBC?
Absolutely. This is my favorite subject. We have absolutely blown it out of the court on a show called Street Sense, which is now running on TikTok. If you'll remember, 25 years ago, it was a TV show produced out of Halifax, Nova Scotia, and today it has been rethought and reimagined, and millions of kids are using it. It's fantastic. But what I'm really, really delighted to talk about also is what we're doing for the Olympics and the Paralympics this year in Paris. Absolutely. Full broadcasting. We just did a launch event, a 100-day countdown. The slogan is, "Brave is invincible." We have Michael J. Fox doing the voiceover on the English tape.
If you can wrap it
And
up, please.
Céline Dion doing the voiceover on the French. So this is thrilling for our kids.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now I go to the Bloc Québécois, Martin Champoux. Martin, 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Je vais essayer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll try to navigate my energy and be somewhere between the Liberals and the Conservatives. I'm wondering, or I have questions about the relevance regarding CBC, Radio-Canada, and making them closer. Ms. Tate, what we hear about your decisions is not very positive. With the Simon Jaudoin and how it was managed, and the podcast in Paris, the different circumstances regarding Michel Bissonnette and the cuts between Radio-Canada and CBC, even though they don't have the same performance, they don't have the same number of employees. There are a lot of things that have made you unpopular in Quebec. You must know the expression, read the room. Do you believe that it was the right time for you to do this when you know that the minister is carrying out this same thing, is reviewing the mandate of CBC Radio-Canada, and then you arrive to the same conclusion as the minister who needs to review the mandate? Why not leave this with your successor instead of binding the hands of your successor with decisions made? I would like to hear what you have to say. I know I don't have a lot of time left.
Pour bien clarifier,
just to clarify, it's the board who asked, and so we did this work to have options ready for the future CEO. Why not let the minister do her work? I hope that what we do helps this committee of experts. We are transparent, we are open, we are sharing all of our ideas. This is not something that needs to be decided on today. The board has asked that we examine this before I leave. That was the idea.
Now go to Ms. Ashton. Nikki, nice try, Martin. And now go to Ms. Ashton. Nikki, 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you. One of the messages that I received, anonymous messages that I received, refers to the use of NDAs by the CBC as, quote, an ironclad policy that is enforced by CBC's legal department, unquote. One of the cases, one of the people that reached out was a journalist who was dealing with a trauma-related injury as a result of the type of stories they were being asked to cover. After taking a pause from their job to heal, they returned to work with a request for accommodation, something CBC was unwilling to accommodate. CBC eventually fired them, beginning a long fight for compensation. CBC refused to take responsibility for the injury. Not only that, despite CBC saying they couldn't do their job, CBC management reached out to their insurance provider to get their benefits canceled, saying they could do their job. This person felt this was retribution, and it's hard to imagine otherwise. Under your leadership, Ms. Tate, is it CBC's policy to punish employees who were disabled on the job and spoke out?
Absolutely not.
And yet this person went through this situation, and your corporation not only fired them, canceled their compensation. No, that's okay. I think the fact that this case exists is very problematic on the reputation of the CBC. I would say another case was an example of the CBC targeting an employee who required specific accommodations for their disability, yet CBC refused despite the fact that this would be a contributing factor to their disability. This employee made clear they felt that this was punitive and retaliatory. CBC was unwilling to make accommodations in that case. NDAs were used. I also want to bring up the fact that the BBC, as a matter of policy, stopped using NDAs in 2014 following its clear abuse to cover up for Jimmy Savile's pedophilia. Has the CBC discussed eliminating the usage of NDAs to stop silencing employment complaints, including on cases of harassment?
Ask Marco to answer that question.
Yes, thank you for your question, Madam Chair. I think the MP's misinformed. We don't comment specific HR files, but I don't think the MP is conveying information that's completely accurate. And since it is anonymous information, it's very hard for us to be able to respond in a specific way. What I will say is that we take all allegations very seriously.
We are talking about the rampant usage of NDAs, and you have said nothing that refers to that reality.
Ashton,
I'm not misinformed. I would appreciate an answer on that.
So I'm going to the Liberals, and it's to the Conservatives for the next round, and it's Mr. Gourde, Jacques Gourde, for 5 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Tate, for being here. When you arrived in your position about 5-6 years ago, you were a new breath at CBC, and now it seems that CBC is breathing its last breath. You're trying to find some balance with the budget, but CBC is a sinking ship, and the numbers show that. And do you think that Radio-Canada is a lifeboat to save CBC? I believe that I've already talked about the performance of CBC, and I did so during our last meeting. We stated that, yes, there was a decline in English television, but it's not only with CBC. And we see a significant increase for digital. Thank you, Ms. Tate. I'm not going to make you repeat what you've already said. The Heritage Minister spoke to the media, stated that she wanted to change the mandate for CBC Radio-Canada, and about a week later, we hear from the media that you might be potentially fusing CBC Radio-Canada. Did you face any political pressure to do that, you or your board? No. And there will be no fusion of CBC Radio-Canada. We're looking at ways to compete with digital giants. We want to find solutions for the digital future. And so, these thoughts came from you. Yes. Radio-Canada reflects Quebec culture and Francophone culture outside of Quebec, and the data shows that it's a success. However, CBC was not able to do the same, and the listening rates show it. How is it that CBC was not able to reach Anglophones to have that same success? Can you respond to the question? Yes, I'll be able to answer. I believe that this allegation is false. Radio-Canada is very distinct. And CBC is number one in different areas in the country. It's the most popular radio. It reaches young people and is a leader in podcast producers in English. I think that CBC's relevance is clear, and to judge CBC on the performance of conventional TV in a competitive market, apologies, Mr. Dubé, I don't have enough time. Ms. Tate, what characterizes the Francophone culture in Quebec, and what characterizes the Anglophone culture outside of Quebec, elsewhere in Canada? We're talking about different cultures. French and la francophonie are very important for listeners for Radio-Canada, but in English Canada, there is support for CBC, but it's more diverse. There's a difference between the different groups. Both are very important for the country. The Anglophone audience, I can't hear your question. Can you repeat? The Anglophone viewers don't seem to identify with CBC. Is it because CBC is too Americanized? No. We're almost entirely Canadian content at prime time. And we know that Anglophone Canadians are loyal to our content. Inaudible. What characterizes the Anglophone culture that could make the difference. We're talking about communities, we're talking about realities, Indigenous realities, realities in the West, in the North. Anglophone Canadians have their own culture as well. You can talk with Ms. Thomas about it.
Thank you very much. I now go to the Liberals. Ms. Jenica Atwin for the Liberals. 5 minutes, please, Jenica.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Tate and Mr. Dubé, for being with us this afternoon. I'm a new face on this committee, so just kind of joining in here, but really happy to have the opportunity to ask some questions today. And as you mentioned, the CBC is a very large corporation. There's lots going on, lots to do. And so I'm just curious, do you have conversations with other public broadcasters, globally or provincially, about the changes and challenges that public broadcasters are facing?
Absolutely. I'm the chair of a thing called the Global Task Force for Public Service Media. And that group is 6 of the largest public broadcasters, and we meet regularly and we talk about challenges. I'm delighted to say we'll be hosting the annual meeting of public broadcasters here in Ottawa in October to talk about the issues that we all face, issues of disinformation, issues of financial challenges, issues of identity, and the role of public broadcasting in the future. And I can just reassure the committee members that our industry is in crisis, not just CBC Radio-Canada, but the entire industry. You've heard it from other witnesses. And rather than be indexing on performance pay, I would urge this committee to think about what are the solutions for the future of domestic media in this country, not just public, private, news, entertainment, because we are in crisis. I've been in this business 40 years, and never before have I seen so great a pressure on our domestic industry. And it is very worrisome. We see people disappearing, companies disappearing, production houses shutting. It is extremely worrisome. It's terrible to lose one individual employee, let alone 140.
Mm-hmm. And would you have any suggestions for some of those solutions that might be put forward that could be helpful for our committee?
I could go on for hours, and I will let the minister invite her expert panel to have some reflection on that. I think sustainable long-term funding is one of the solutions, and I look forward to being able to converse with that panel when they are announced.
And how might other organizations be adapting to the changes in, say, advertising market, given hundreds of millions of dollars that it used to be relied on may no longer be available? Like, what kind of shifts are taking place?
Well, the advertising industry also is under extreme pressure. We've seen a decline in traditional television and advertising. At CBC Radio-Canada, we've also been able to increase our digital advertising, but nowhere near at the same rate. You've heard the digital pennies versus linear dollars analogy. So all of us are looking for how do we produce the same amount of content, how do we deliver the same amount of information, but in more efficient ways? So to Mr. Champoux' question, how do we transform the way we actually produce the content so that it's more efficiently done rather than at the higher costs of the past?
And how are the various institutions moving to address the risk of structural shortfalls going forward? And how does CBC Radio-Canada compare?
I think we're all struggling with the structural issues. And when we look at Google or Facebook or Netflix or Amazon, who have penetrated our market with no regulatory obligations or little regulatory obligations, we are really at a loss, to be honest. We're doing our very best every day to maximize our impact and to maintain services to our audiences. But there are really no quick fixes here unless we are willing to stand up and say that it's time for the digital giants to give back.
And just quickly, with regards to some of the job losses that we've seen, how many jobs become vacant in an average fiscal year?
Oh, well, that's a good question. We probably have about 500 positions that are either through resignation or through retirement that become available in any given year. Is that a correct number? Yeah, 500.
So simply put, there's sort of a regular churn,
Absolutely.
CBC, employees that may come and go.
And if I may say,
30 seconds.
in the past, CBC Radio-Canada had an employee body of about 10,000. Today, we're at 7,500. 90% of our budget is dedicated to our workforce. So if something hits us, an economic hardship or a financial hardship, the only lever we have is through workforce adjustment, just to be clear.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Atwin. I now go to our third round, beginning with Tom Kimek for the Conservatives. You have 5 minutes, Mr. Kimek.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Donc, parlons des
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll start by talking about francophones outside of Quebec. When I do door knocking in my riding, and I tell people that CBC will be receiving less funding, they're not shocked. But when we see talk about a merger, and this plan exists in order to compete with digital giants. But Ms. Tate, you stated that there won't be a merger of the two services, and there are other comments that actually show that it is something that will be considered by the board. So where's the truth? Will this merger be considered, yes or no? No. And so the board is not going to consider this. The question on the merging of the two services is not something that we're looking at. We're talking about aligning services and technology platforms, but we're not talking about content. There's no merger of content. We're not only talking about content. You're talking about an alignment. That could be a merger. If I look at Mr. Dubé, who stated that it's the next CEO who will decide, but we are thinking about using public funds properly, and Canadians expect quality content in English and French, but also expect that we don't duplicate resources just for the sake of it. And so where would that duplication happen? In programming? I will ask Mr. Dubé to respond. I would like to clarify, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to clarify. We are examining our organization, and we want to look at this digital shift in the long term. CBC and Radio-Canada need to be protected because it represents those different media in their markets. CBC Radio-Canada is a corporation and has been for over 90 years, and we have always shared resources because it was an efficient way to spend public funds that is given to us for our programming. Now we want to see how... One moment, please. In these articles, we see, as you mentioned, that Radio-Canada and CBC have multiple similar services. For example, funding, human resources, equipment, technology, buildings, infrastructure. What's left that would not be impacted by this plan? You talked about harmonization, alignment, but as a francophone outside of Quebec, I see this as a merger of CBC Radio-Canada that is going to be considered by the board. There are ways where we could work more closely in the organization that wouldn't be programming, for example, in technology. Technology to build for the future, not technology from the past. And for minority communities, it's an example of how CBC and Radio-Canada can work together. If we can offer content in French outside of Quebec, it's because we use the resources at our disposal, and we have Francophone and Anglophone people working on programming that meets the needs of both markets. I'm going to ask my question again. The board will be looking at what this fall? What will they have to consider? New software, new technology, but you said to La Presse that this infrastructure is already shared. So I would like to know what will be considered by the board. It's too early for us to tell you what the board will be looking at in the fall. The plan is not finalized. The substance will be how we organize our resources to continue the digital transition where linear media, traditional media, is declining and people are turning towards digital giants, and we want to be relevant as public broadcasters.
Go to the Liberals, Marc Sarret. Marc, you have 5 minutes.
I think there's a correction here. I think it's...
Well, then I should be informed about it, please.
Yeah. You want it, right?
Is it Mr. Noor Mohammed? I'm sorry, Monsieur Sarret. Talib, you are up next for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Tate, one of the things that I'd like to focus a little bit on, because while I was in the room and then while I was out, I was still following some of the conversation that was going on. And I really want to spend a little bit of time talking about the way in which CBC looking forward thinks about the importance of regional programming, regional representation, and the conversations that CBC is going to be a part of in terms of ensuring that Canadians have access to Canadian content from across this country, particularly from small communities, rural communities, Indigenous communities, and how you're thinking about then the construct of the current environment.
So just to that question, Madam Chair, I asked one of my colleagues in preparation for this appearance today, how many hours of content do we produce every year? And the answer was 2.6 million hours, radio, television content, 7,000 hours per day. 600 articles on cbc.ca and radiocanada.ca, and 80% of those articles are from the regions. The regions, and you call it the regions, anything outside of Toronto and Montreal is the core of our service. When we talk about our competitive advantage vis-a-vis digital giants, it's our proximity to Canadians. That's why we double down on libraries and we're present and focused on newcomers, because we can't assume that somebody who just moves to Canada will have that long-term relationship with either Radio-Canada or CBC. That's why we produce a show like Lakainu to reach Haitian Francophones in Montreal and across Canada. So regions. And I can say, just as we're working on a transformation plan, we're also preparing our next strategic plan. Again, not to tie the hands of my successor, but to prepare him or her with as much information so that they are as well prepared as they possibly can and hit the road running. Because the reality is they will have to launch a new strategic plan in the first 6 months of their tenure. And so we've done that work. And number one priority is proximity, our presence in community. That is the power of CBC Radio-Canada.
I just want to dig in on this a little bit. You know, it's the playoffs. Over the course of the season, a lot of people have enjoyed Hockey Night in Canada in different languages. And that's been an important step on the part of CBC. What's the impact? What's the impact?
Hockey Night in Canada, sports in general, like one of the ways that we reach Canadians is through amateur sports. We are the only broadcaster that is showing the hundreds and hundreds of amateur athletes and giving them a platform, female athletes, para-athletes. So when we talk about Hockey Night in Canada or the playoffs, it's fantastic. We have over 1 million viewers tuning in to CBC. To say CBC television is no longer relevant, it is the only place where Canadians can watch the hockey games that they love for free. Remember, otherwise it's behind a paywall.
So let's talk about the consequences of cuts. You know, I think there was a lot of feigned outrage about the possibility of steps that you might take. I think there was some concern about what that might look like. But I think the bigger question is we've heard from members opposite their desire to basically put a for sale sign on the CBC, basically gut it, turn offices into God knows what, sell the CBC, get rid of it, gut it, all kinds of different expressions. And yet they say something else to people in Quebec. They say, oh, no, we're going to save Radio-Canada, but we're going to gut CBC. I mean, realistically, you know, can you talk a little bit to us about how somehow the intertwining of those operations, particularly in places like my hometown of Vancouver, where Radio-Canada and CBC work from the same office, or many of the reporters and camera people do double duty? Like, walk us through that, and how ridiculous is this assertion that you could completely destroy the CBC, but somehow save Radio-Canada?
I don't feel comfortable commenting on any political position regarding the future of CBC Radio-Canada. It's not appropriate for me to comment on that. But what I can say is that we know that 80% of Canadians believe that CBC Radio-Canada has a role to play in the future of this country. We know that 75% of Canadians consider CBC Radio-Canada the most trusted source of credible news in this country. The Leger brand reputation study released last month indicated that CBC Radio-Canada is the top brand among media companies in this country. So dismantling CBC, in my mind, which serves 30 million Canadians...
Please wrap up your answer, Ms. Tate. Thank
would
you.
be basically not listening to those 80% of Canadians who believe it's an extremely important and a growing importance for this country.
Thank you very much. And I'll go to the bloc Martin for 2.5 minutes. Thank you.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Tate, we're talking about CBC's issues, and CBC might envy Radio-Canada's success, with good reason, because Radio-Canada is a broadcaster that is greatly appreciated by Quebecers and Francophones in Canada. We're talking about the difficulties faced by CBC in the market. I believe, sincerely, in the importance of a public broadcaster, and I believe that CBC is essential to Canada's democracy, and Radio-Canada is essential to the preservation of the Quebec and Francophone culture. But I believe that the fight is happening in the wrong place. I feel like we're not looking at other ways to save our public broadcaster. How much does it cost per Canadian per year for a public broadcaster? Do people know? Because we hear, oh, we're going to defund CBC, it costs a fortune. How much does it cost? $33. $33. Are we competitive? We are 16th among other public broadcasters in the world. BBC, for example, is 5 times. ARD in Germany is 8 times higher. ARD, 8 times. Is this something that we should explore? And is there a way to make CBC independent and financially stable? And could we also support the private sector, which would no longer be sharing with the public broadcaster? Is this something that could be examined? Splitting the two? I'm not talking about creating two entities. I want them both to be viable without us being concerned for both. And CBC is currently facing significant challenges. CBC has also had a lot of success. We're talking about TV. Radio-Canada's success in TV is exceptional. There's good content and good products, but there are financial issues as well. And for other broadcasters, currently the plate is shared by different players, and it benefits digital giants. There needs to be appropriate public funding that is comparable to what we see in similar countries to believe that this could be a solution and remove some of the weight on the Canadian broadcasting system. If you talk about removing ads, I think that we need to look at other public broadcasters. They're all trying to find other sources of revenue because to have only public funding is a weakness. Inaudible.
I'll go to Ms. Ashton. Nikki, 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you. I want to begin by taking issue with Mr. Dubé's comment about being misinformed. I think it's indicative of the arrogance of the CBC and clearly based on very vulnerable stories that were shared to us by your employers. I think it's also insulting. You have an NDA problem. We know that the BBC banned the use of NDAs in 2014. My question to you, Ms. Tate, as the leader of this organization, why isn't CBC doing the same?
I will look into what you're describing as the NDA problem. I'm not aware of this being a problem. What I will say to you is that we are leaders in the efforts for well-being and support to our employees. During a very, very difficult time during the pandemic, as you well know, there was a great social justice outcry. We launched an anti-harassment and anti-racism platform for people to be able to anonymously declare any concerns they might have. We've done a lot of work in this area, and I'm very proud of that work.
I want to pick up on that exact point. And first of all, I want to be clear. We're talking about the use of NDAs prior to investigations, forcing employees to sign an NDA before their case is investigated. That's what we're hearing is happening at the CBC, which is unacceptable. I want to bring up a case. A journalist who had written a number of articles about discrimination as part of their work experienced that same discrimination and harassment themselves. They complained to CBC, and CBC said they wouldn't investigate the case until they signed a non-disclosure agreement. They refused, and their claim was investigated without their participation. The investigation was eventually closed without a resolution. This person went and found additional income during that time so they could be able to afford to pay their bills while their harassment case was being dealt with, and as a result, CBC fired them. Once again, a culture of retribution and a reliance on non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreements to silence people whose only issue was that they didn't want to take CBC's abuse lying down. It's embarrassing, and it shouldn't be happening. C-65 mandated that harassment investigations must take place in a timely manner. Delaying an investigation until which time an NDA is signed is a flagrant contravention of that law. Do you find that do you find this practice acceptable?
We are in full compliance with that law. And if I may say, all indication from our annual Gallup polls is that the healthy environment for the majority of our employees is very much intact. We've seen higher engagement scores over the last 6 years. And I am enormously proud of the support that we've provided. Our work on online harassment of our journalists, our work on all sorts of benefits, and most recently in our collective agreements with the Canada Media Guild, extending benefits for example, for Indigenous employees. We've done an enormous amount of work.
We're going to have to wrap that up. We've gone well over time, and I've allowed it because Martin got some extra time. So there we go. I am now going to go to the Conservatives. Kevin Waugh. Kevin, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Tate, along with Mr. Dubé, for coming. Ms. Tate, when you sat in the chair, you went, whoa, we've had a pretty good year. We're only going to lose $100 million. right? You said that. You've had a decent year. You were projected for 2024-25, $125 million deficit. You think you've reduced it by 20. Okay, so go ahead then.
No, we've reduced it by $100 million. Our deficit is now $20 million, which is a far more manageable number.
All right, so news media reports are false. You're only at $20 million. So when you went to the Liberals, whoever went to the Liberals, asking for $42 million extra in the budget, what was that for? Was it for saving jobs, or was it for executive bonuses?
It was for saving jobs and to be able to reinvest in the independent production communities, in Francophone communities and Anglophone communities.
Was that the condition of the money that you received?
No. It's there is no condition when they grant an award as such.
Well, you got $96 million in the main estimates and another $42 in the budget. So you got an extra $138 million of taxpayers' money.
I've already clarified that the $100 million is related to salary inflation, so it's not incremental dollars. So what we received was $42 million in incremental funding.
So you said on your management team, you're separate from the bonuses. Your 2 executive vice presidents and 5 vice presidents are separate from you on the bonus structure. Who decides your bonus?
The government. The board of directors makes an evaluation of my performance and submits it to the minister, and the minister then reviews it and submits it to the government.
Has that been done, or when will it be done?
For this year, no. It'll be done in June.
And then, when would that be made public, or would it be made public for you? You say most bonuses in your corporation are July. Could they give that money to you in June?
No, I do not receive. Again, I'm part of a government process that can take many, many months.
So you may not receive bonuses. You, as the CEO, may not get a bonus until the fall.
I may not get it until a year later.
Have you received previous bonuses on time, being July?
No.
So when have you received your previous bonuses?
Probably 9 months to a year later.
But you're going to be retired.
I beg your pardon?
In January. You're going to be retired,
I know,
in January.
I'll have to wait.
Okay. So for the other 7, who makes the recommendation? You to the board, or is it the board?
So I make a recommendation based on performance based on the KPIs. We would assess the key performance indicators, and then there's a 30% personal objectives element. So I make the evaluation of that performance piece for each of the 7 executives.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Your KPIs aren't doing well. I don't know what you're using for key performance indicators. I would say 80% are not met in your corporation. I'm going to challenge you on that. But yet you continue to give bonuses or performance bonuses, whatever you want to call it. The network isn't doing very well. I mean, I laughed at Mr. Noor Mohammed talking about the NHL on CTV. You've given it to Rogers for nothing because you couldn't fill the time when you lost the NHL contract when Rogers picked it up. So you've actually given Rogers carte blanche. Go ahead. 3 hours are yours, 6 hours are yours on Saturday. We won't have anything to do with it, but we get eyeballs on free TV. Isn't that right?
They paid many billions of dollars for the NHL rights.
They did, but not to you.
No, and therefore that was why we did not feel we should compete with a private broadcaster in that instance. If there's a private broadcaster that wants to purchase the rights, we stepped back.
You did.
But just to be very clear, you're talking about television.
30 seconds.
I'm talking about what?
You're talking about television. Our KPIs are on a digital future. Our audiences have moved to digital.
So how do you do TV then? How do you assess TV? Because I don't know how many CBC stations are doing very well in the ratings in this country. Maybe you can provide that after this meeting.
I'm happy to do so.
Okay. So television. How do you, if you don't use KPI on television, what do you use?
We look at our results of, for example, one of our KPIs.
1 second left.
Anyways, would you provide me and the committee with the ratings of CBC locally, coast to coast? 6 o'clock newscast, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Kevin. I now go to the Liberals, Anna Gainey. Anna, for 5 minutes, please. I have Anna Gainey on the list, so unless the Liberals have changed their lineup, let me know.
Mark can go, sure.
Mark Saray for 5 minutes, please.
Or I can go.
Thanks. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to start, Ms. Tate. Perhaps you know, my father was an MP in 78-72. He proposed a petition with 21,000 signatures to have Radio-Canada in Northern Ontario. I'm very proud of the work that my father did and that others did to make this possible. And so I'm having a hard time with conservative attacks when they're talking about CBC and Radio-Canada. And Martin, hopefully later you'll be able to talk about the importance of the francophonie outside of Quebec. I would like to understand, Ms. Tate, how, and conservatives mentioned eliminating CBC and removing its funding, and how can we ensure that in a minority community like in Sudbury that Radio-Canada would be kept? How would that happen? Would you need more money for Radio-Canada because you're sharing buildings and infrastructure? How can Radio-Canada stay strong in a minority situation if CBC's funding is completely eliminated by the Conservatives? It'll be very difficult, if not nearly impossible. So, if the Conservatives were to eliminate CBC, and I don't know if the Bloc agrees with that position or not. Point of order, please. Mr. Seri is insinuating things, and perhaps we could be civil. The Bloc never talked about defunding the CBC. I just raised a comment very clearly stating that I wanted us to strengthen CBC and make it more viable while protecting Radio-Canada. So I just wanted to clarify things. Mr. Seri, let's play these games elsewhere. I'm happy that you clarified, Martin, that because the Bloc will be supporting Radio-Canada throughout the country, and so I'm happy to hear you say it. Thank you for the clarification. Ms. Tate, when we talk about CBC and equipment, I struggle with the Conservatives' position that they will eliminate the CBC. You stated that it's difficult, it'll be very difficult, but what does that mean? Beyond Montreal, other CBC Radio-Canada stations outside of Quebec will be eliminated if CBC ceases to receive funding? We don't know what the impact would be. I can't guess, but the Conservatives are clear. They would be removing billions of dollars. They're talking about $1 billion, but as you say, that's not only shared by CBC Radio-Canada outside of Quebec, it's shared inside Quebec as well. So $1 billion, that's more than half of our budget. And so if we cut that, it will be a disaster for Francophone media outside of Quebec. That's guaranteed. I hope that my Conservative and NDP colleagues realize that the Conservatives, with their leader that is constantly talking about defunding the CBC, how irresponsible it is. And I don't understand why other parties do not position themselves clearly regarding the importance of maintaining CBC, Radio-Canada, because minority communities will struggle. And I would like for us, Ms. Tate, to talk about the North and content, Indigenous content. The role of the public broadcaster is to serve all Canadians. And so we are in Indigenous communities, in minority communities, even if it's not profitable. It's a public service. That's our mandate. If I can use an Anglicism here, we're a lifeline for people who want to live in French outside of Quebec. Thank you, Ms. Tate.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mark. I now go to a fourth round. Now, we have 20 minutes left, and a fourth round would take us to 25 minutes. So I would like to ask the committee if they mind if I change the timing to 4-4-2-2-4-4, and we can have a round. Yes, that's good. Philip Lawrence for the CPC, 4 minutes, please.
Yeah, can you explain that one more time, Chair?
It takes 25 minutes to do one more full round. We only have 20 minutes left. So if I change the timing from 5-5, 2.5, 2.555 to 4-4-2-2-4-4, we should get a round in. So, and everyone seems to be okay with that.
Madam Chair, we started a few minutes late, so we should have 25 minutes still. We should be able to have a full round.
Ask the clerk.
Yes, we have until 6:05.
Okay, I'm told by the clerk we have until 6:05, so that gives us a full round. So we will go as per usual. Philip Lawrence for Conservatives. Philip, 5 minutes, please.
Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Tate, for being here today. One of the CBC shows that I will admit as a Conservative I'd like to watch is Canada Tonight show, and of course it features Travis Don-Raj, and I'm wondering, do you watch that show? All right, and then I'm a little bit curious as to why Mr. Don-Raj had this exchange with you, Ms. Tate. He tweeted on April 19th, 2024. At the time when the public broadcaster is under increasing scrutiny and when transparency is needed, Canada Tonight requested an interview with Catherine Tate. We wanted to discuss the new budget funding, what it means for jobs and the corporation's strategic priorities ahead. Our request was declined. This is unfortunate. Why did you decline Mr. Don-Raj's?
I was on annual leave. I wasn't available.
Okay. Then Mr. Don-Raj curiously tweeted on April 19th, 2020, or sorry, after this tweet, he tweeted on May 2nd, my apologies, on May 2nd, 2024, he tweeted he was back on Canada Tonight. Meaning he went into he disappeared from the air for a week or 10 days there. Was this because of any type of repercussions? Because he asked, he was calling out you publicly, Ms. Tate?
I'm not aware of any repercussions, no.
Because just on the heels of my colleague Ms. Ashton's comments, I find it a little bit strange that one of your stars, Mr. Don-Raj, calls you out publicly, and then he disappears from the air for a week or 10 days. And I would just like to point you to your own conflict of interest policy that says, our standards do not change when the CBC or a partner of CBC becomes the public interest, becomes the story. Public interest guides our choices. Do you still stand by that statement?
Of course, and just to be clear, I don't get involved in the programming and scheduling decisions in the newsroom, so I have to assume that there's a reason that occurred for Travis Don-Raj, but I'm not, again, involved in any of those discussions.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm not a booking agent for Mr. Don-Raj, but I would assume that he would probably like to have you on the show again. Would if Mr. Don-Raj reached out to you, would you commit to going on to a show?
I will look at all invitations. As you can imagine, we have many shows, and that's just at CBC Radio-Canada. So I try to make myself available to as many as I can, given whatever's on the schedule at the time.
And just to finish up, you didn't give me a complete, rejection of my premise that perhaps there was something off the fact that Mr. Dhanraj was taken off the air shortly after calling out you publicly. Can you confirm unequivocally to the committee that there were no reprisals or no negative outcomes to Mr. Dhanraj for his calling you out publicly for not appearing on his show?
I'm not aware of any.
Okay. Thank you very much. I wanted to just tidy up a couple things with respect to executive bonuses. So you said, of course, your bonus will be set by the government, and you'll be receiving that for the fiscal year of 2023-2024. You'll be receiving that in maybe 9 months. What was your bonus, though, for 2022-2023 fiscal year, and when did you receive it?
I think the range of my bonuses or performance pay is public, and I have not received it as yet, so I don't know what I will or will not receive.
For the fiscal year of 2022-2023, I understand your testimony is that you haven't received it, but you don't even know the quantum of it yet?
Correct.
Okay. What about for 2021-2022?
Yes, I did receive that.
Would you mind sharing how much
I'm
that
not.
was?
This is personnel information. I don't believe I'm under any obligation to disclose the exact amount. The range is published on the website. It's a maximum of 28% of my salary.
We're actually Parliament, which means that we can ask for any information we want. So kindly, if you would provide us with the bonus you received for 2021-2022.
I'd like to get legal counsel to make sure that it's in compliance with the Privacy Act before I do so, but if it is, I will provide it to this committee.
Could you provide us, because you said it's publicly available information, could you provide us with a range for, if you know it, for 2023-2024? If you don't, we'll keep going back to the years that you do know.
Okay.
Okay. Well, okay. Thank you, Ms. Tate, for appearing.
Thank you.
Thank you. I now go to Ms. Gainey for the Liberals. Anna?
Thank you,
5
Madam
minutes.
Chair. So we've heard a little bit about ratings today, and I thought maybe we could take this chunk of time to get a more fulsome picture of the question of ratings. So I'm wondering if you could elaborate for a little bit for us on how many Canadians use the CBC's online news services, the music and audio streaming services like CBC Listen, video streaming services, GEM, I gather, podcast, radio. Try to give us a more fulsome picture of the consumption or the participation of Canadians in the content that you're producing.
Yeah, just to be clear to the previous member's question, when I joined CBC Radio-Canada, the number of Canadians that were consuming linear TV was at about about 30%, and the number consuming just online was at about 18. Those numbers have now reversed. So when we talk about performance of CBC, we measure digital performance. So today, CBC.ca reaches about 17 million Canadians every month. That is the single largest number. Sometimes CTV is at the same level, but pretty well, and certainly during the pandemic, that number shot up to 22 million, and again, add Radio-Canada into that, close to 25 million Canadians touching in on our digital platforms, just the .ca. In terms of podcasting, English Canada, CBC, is the leader in digital podcasting with close to 10 million downloads every month from CBC Listen, Spotify, and Apple. Radio-Canada launched its podcasting service about a year ago and has now become fantastically #1 in French language as well. With respect to GEM, when I joined it, didn't exist. Mm-hmm. We launched GEM in 2019, and today about 2 million Canadians, English Canadians, tune in to GEM. And most importantly, for consumption of news, another 1 million are consuming news on YouTube. So when we talk about the audience for the national, to the honorable members, a question about TV 6 o'clock news, it isn't the market that we are looking at anymore. We're looking at the digital audience, and for the national, about 1.2 million Canadians tune in on a variety of platforms, including connected TVs, to consume that very, very important show.
So looking at those trends and the inversion of how people are consuming news and media, where is your focus on the future, and where do you see the most growth, and how is the CBC investing in that growth?
Well, I think if you followed the CRTC licensing process, one of the big breakthroughs was that the CRTC recognized that for our investments in programs of national interest, that's drama, comedy, variété, for those investments, they would now count digital expenditures as well as linear. So the future is digital. We are moving to an entirely digital world. When will that happen? For sure in Quebec, at 23% market share for linear television, I think we've got a good long time, and we will protect it because it's really, really powerful and very important. But in English Canada, the shift to digital is already well on its way, and that's why we're launching fast channels and doing all the work we are to reach Canadians where they are, on the devices that they're using.
So how do we address then the news deserts that we've called them? As we've seen the TV market shrink, and then we've seen the contraction of those jobs shrink across this industry too. You've referred to the crisis. How do we help bring Canadians along on that transition where it's not happening as quickly and they feel like there's a shortage of local news available to them?
I think it's exactly what CBC should be doing, and Radio-Canada as well. Launching, for example, local podcasts, which we just did, 7 local podcasts in specific towns across the country, so that there's local news produced by the local, the people that live in the community. And that will be the power. Podcasts, fast channels, GEM, all of those tools to make sure that we're reaching those Canadians. And as I said, 80% of our news is coming from outside of Toronto and Montreal.
Okay, merci. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I don't have any more questions.
I'm sorry, I was just speaking with the clerk for a second. We have 2 seconds left, 1 second left. Thank you. I'm now going to go, sorry, Ms. Gainey. I'm now going to go to Mr. Shampoo for 2.5 minutes, please, Martin.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Bon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to reassure my colleague, Mr. Serré. The Bloc has a very strong position when we protect Radio-Canada and French services, and when we say that we're protecting Quebec and Francophone culture, and we talk about an increased influence of CBC on Radio-Canada, we react. Francophones in Canada and in Quebec appreciate having a healthy broadcaster, and I wanted to share this, which is very important to the Bloc and doesn't seem understood by the Liberal government. We want to protect our public broadcaster, which supports our culture in Quebec and Canada. Ms. Tate, you mentioned that cutting CBC would cause an impact on Radio-Canada. And so if a Conservative government brought cuts to CBC, there would be an impact on Francophone services. If there were cuts to CBC, would the funds be given to Radio-Canada, or would you let CBC die and maintain services in French as they are? It's not the kind of question that we're looking at right now, because we're far from the possibility of defunding the CBC. we want to work on changing our services, working on our strategy to ensure the viability of our services. You are not examining the threat under a Conservative government? Do you not have a contingency plan or a vision of what that could look like? Not for now. I think that might be a good idea to do so instead of harmonizing CBC and Radio-Canada. We are currently focusing on competing with digital giants and all the other pressures, but not the real threat of a Conservative government. No, we're waiting to see the results of the next election. Thank you, Ms. Tate.
I now go to Nikki Ashton. 2.5 minutes, please, Nikki.
Madam Tate, I want to begin by saying that during the testimony, we heard from one of the whistleblowers that they, in fact, did speak to you personally about the abuse of NDAs, including in their case. So I understand it is an issue that has been raised with you. I want to share an excerpt from an anonymous employee who wrote, "It is anathema to what CBC rightly expects from its journalists: transparency, accountability, and fairness. The CBC actually uses public funds to pay private lawyers to insulate its legal department from the burden of grinding down its own employees through this abusive process. Someone needs to ask Ms. Tate on the record about the extent of CBC's practice to demand NDAs and other ganging devices such as non-disparagement clauses when settling with employees who have well-founded and proven claims of abuse." End quote. And I will also add to that the whistleblower's statement that another whistleblower statement that they were told that they had to sign an NDA in order for their case to be investigated. These are chilling stories for any media organization, but I would say it is wildly unacceptable for our state broadcaster to be running the show like this. It is wildly unacceptable for the CBC, that is publicly funded, built by Canadians, to be able to be treating its employees like this. What we've heard today is how, under your leadership and under the current CBC reality, our national broadcaster, perhaps paralyzed by fear of right-wing attacks, is making poor choice after poor choice. The doling out of exorbitant executive bonuses is unacceptable at a time when we've seen cuts, layoffs, and of course, Canadians are going through such a difficult time. The crushing of all internal complaints through the abuse of non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreements and the mass firings of workers in your organization are unacceptable. CBC is increasingly resembling the Bells of this world, and Canadians will not stand for it.
24 seconds.
For a federally funded journalism organization to abuse journalists, spend public funds on high-powered lawyers to find them, and then gag them through NDAs is unacceptable. Canadians deserve better. CBC employees deserve better. Canadian communities deserve better. We all deserve better.
Thank you, Ms. Ashton. I will now go to the Conservatives for 5 minutes. Ms. Thomas.
Thank you. Ms. Tate, you confirmed that under Trudeau, you've been granted another $140 million. There was just over $96 million that was a part of the main estimates, and then another $42 million that were a part of Budget 2024. So a total of $140. Is this additional funding that is coming your way contingent on no more bonuses for executives?
First of all, the funding from Treasury Board in the main estimates is not incremental funding. That is a salary inflation funding that all government departments and crowns get. What we have received is $42 million, and it is not contingent on performance pay or as we are operating at the arm's length organization, we have a certain amount of discretion. Obviously, in this case, those funds will be applied to ensure no further job cuts and reinvestment in the independent production sector.
So sorry, just to confirm then, it is contingent on no further job cuts?
I have assumed that it is. There is no direction when the government assigns dollars in the way that it does. There was nothing written in the decision.
So are you committing today then that during the year of 2024-25, there will be no more job cuts at the CBC?
There will be no significant job cuts related to balancing our budget. We are an organization that constantly, as you heard earlier, have people coming and going, and we are constantly adjusting programming. I will never make a decision on behalf of the newsroom on a program that they may or may not decide to cut.
So on December 4th, you announced that 800 jobs were going to be cut from the CBC. So far, 400 of those jobs, close to 400 of those jobs have been cut. Meanwhile, the government has granted $140 million new dollars, taxpayer dollars, to the CBC, and you continued to contend for your own executive bonus. And
Point of
the
order,
executive
Madam
bonus
Chair.
Of
Look, I respect Ms. Thomas's right to tweet whatever she wants, but now she's making accusations here, and now a committee of a witness, and basically that they're saying that they're.
Chair, this is not a point of
Can I
order.
get to my point, please? Thank you.
I need to listen to the point before I can rule on it, Philip.
She's basically saying that their testimony is now factually inaccurate. Like, she knows that she's the one misrepresenting what the witness said when she appeared on January 20th. I've got copies of the transcripts of what was said at that meeting, where she verbally attacked the witness with the clear intention of trying to get a clip that she thought she might be able to use for whatever purpose. The records show that the witness and her team clarified this issue, and I don't know what the member was doing, but I would like to point to the facts of that testimony, and unless my colleague can point to an alternative set of facts, I'd like to
This is
ask
not a
her to
point of order,
withdraw the
Madam Chair.
accusations that Ms. Tate is not representing the truth.
This is not a point of order. That's not a point of order.
I'm afraid it isn't, Mr. Nur Mohammed. So go ahead, Ms.
Sorry,
Thomas.
Madam Chair, my request that she withdraw the accusation that the witness is lying.
You don't have the floor.
Well, you have a request. A member has a request for withdrawing the accusation. I think that Ms.
Not a
Thomas.
point of order. The point of order is the floor is Ms. Tate. His point of order is invalid. It's Ms.
Well-
Ms. Thomas. This is clear. Ask the clerk.
I know that in this meeting, and these members and witnesses quite often are accused of things that are not necessarily so. And in many instances, people have had to suggest that this is not an appropriate way to assume what people's intentions are. So I'm just suggesting that we should try and be a little more respectful and not badger witnesses or each other with accusations and assumptions. Thank you. Ms. Thomas?
Ms. Tate, clearly you have the members across the way doing your bidding for you today.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yeah, that's horrible.
This is not a point of order.
This is not
This
keeping
is
decorum
not
in
a
committee.
point of order. You were out of
Mr.
order,
Lawrence made a
sir.
point
You were out
last
of
meeting.
order.
Mr. Lawrence, at the last meeting,
tell me the
made a big
section.
show
This is not
about
an order.
when. May I make
Order. Mr. Nur Mohammed has the floor.
At the last meeting, Madam Chair, Mr. Lawrence made great show of being offended when a member was accused of their point of view being misrepresented. I think it is deeply offensive, at a minimum, that the member opposite would assert that I am here to do the bidding of any witness. I raised a
Madam
point of order in
Chair, this
respect
is
of the
not-
testimony that was
this is not a
presented,
point of
and I
order.
want people to know what the truth is. And the testimony that I have here from that day would clear that record up.
Madam
What I don't
Chair, this is
appreciate
not a
is that
point
I am
of
being
order.
told by the
We
member
have
opposite
rules.
that
This is
somehow
not
I'm doing the
Please,
bidding of a witness.
I would like
And I would
Mr.
like
Nur
that comment
Mohammed to
withdrawn.
speak.
And I would very much like that comment to be withdrawn because I am not here to do the bidding of any witness. I'm here to do the bidding of my constituents.
And as chair, I'm supposed to actually ensure there's decorum and a respectful way that we treat each other and our witnesses. I think that we have a member asking that one member withdraw a comment that is an assumption and perhaps misleading, and I'm going to ask the member if she wishes to
A point of
withdraw
order.
the-
Point of order.
Yes, Mr. Lawrence.
Madam Chair, Mr. Nur Mohammed has not given a valid point of order. We are governed in this committee and this country by rules. So his point of order was invalid, and therefore Ms. Thomas has the floor. His comments are invalid. He does
Madam
not have the floor.
Mr. Lawrence, I'm here to ensure we stay on the business that we're doing here now, which is asking questions of CBC and asking for their accountability on certain issues. And I think if we're going to talk about decorum, decorum means that we do not suggests that something else is going on in somebody's minds. We're not mind readers in this place. And I think it's unfair that we do this a lot to each other and to witnesses. I think if a member has said this is outside of the decorum of this committee, I know that Mr. Shampoo also asked Mr. Saray that he should not suggest what Mr. Shampoo and the bloc are thinking. And Mr. Saray withdrew that and said, thank you for the answer. So let's behave in like manner. I think this is a reasonable request from one member. And I would like Ms. Thomas to answer the question. Will you withdraw that misleading piece of information that was included in the question? Mr. Lawrence, this is not debatable anymore. You do not have a point of order. I'm sorry. Ms. Thomas?
Chair, I said it would appear, and that statement stands. It would appear.
So would you please repeat your statement, Ms. Thomas?
I don't believe there's anything that requires me to.
Well, I don't know. It would appear stands alone. It would appear. What would appear?
Madam Chair, normally these things are reviewed in the blues if you wish to make an issue of this.
And we have done that in the past, Ms. Thomas.
Absolutely. And so I would invite you to review the blues and make sure that you are asking something that is appropriate, and then to come back to this committee and make the request of me.
Madam Chair, then I would request that we suspend to do that, or adjourn, given that it's 6:05, and then we can come. Because I would like a resolution to this
Would
matter.
be raised on a point of order, which you cannot move a motion on a point of order.
Correct.
I agree with you. You cannot move a motion on a point of order, Mr. Mohammed. But I think that this is requesting that the meeting be adjourned because it's now 5 minutes after 6.
I have the chair. I have the floor, Madam Chair. And I'm in the middle of a question round, and I've been interrupted numerous times by the members across the way.
And we have suggested at the beginning, when we went to this last round, that we had until 5 minutes after 6. I'm looking at the clock. It is now 5 minutes after 6.
Madam Chair,
this
point of order.
committee would like to continue with this discussion, I would like to hear from the committee with regard to adjournment. There's no debate on this. There's a question.
No, I do have the floor, Madam
You have the
Chair.
floor, but the meeting is over, Ms. Thomas.
It's
No,
not
it doesn't,
over.
It doesn't just end
5 minutes after
when I'm in the
6.
middle of a question round.
Yeah.
We had points of order that did that. We have to leave this room at a certain time, I'm told by the chair, by the clerk, and so we have to
I
vacate
don't know
the
that that's
room.
entirely true. Perhaps you could check with the clerk and see if we could
Clerk,
extend another
inform-
5 minutes.
Ms. Thomas, you seem to have this penchant for arguing with everyone who makes any suggestions.
Well, that's
we
quite the
do have.
accusation.
I was
Order.
told,
That
and
is
we heard.
inappropriate.
Mr. Lawrence, please allow me to speak. When we were going to this last round, Mr. Shampoo suggested that we should find out how much more time we have left so that we could do 25 minutes. The clerk informed me then that we had till 5 minutes after 6. It was clear. She said it. I repeated it. So this is not a
Point of order,
something I'm
Madam Chair.
making up.
Point of order, and you have a obligation to listen to my point of order. This is not optional.
go ahead with your point of order, yes.
No, it is not adjourned.
It's
And
not
I have a
adjourned
point of
because we
order,
didn't
and we're
call a
continuing
question.
on here. Because he raised a series of non-point of orders, which you, against the rules, recognize. That was against the rules. That got rid of her time. It would be an affront to democracy if you do not allow her to continue. This was clearly an obstruction of the process. Please continue to allow Ms. Thomas. Otherwise, I will be bringing a point of privilege.
Right. We now have, it's now 10 minutes after 6. Clerk, do we have time to finish this meeting?
That's up to the committee. I can
We don't have the UC to do this.
Pardon?
No,
It's up to the
not
committee.
it's on the committee. Sorry.
The clerk informs me it is up to the committee to decide whether they want to
I
continue.
have a point of order.
Yes, Ms. Thomas.
Thank you. Madam Chair, you accused me, and I'll use your words, of interrupting everyone.
Yes.
That's a superlative. Interrupting everyone, which is unparliamentary. So, Madam Chair, I would bring that to your attention, and I would ask you to make a ruling as to whether or not that should be withdrawn. Does Ms. Thomas, interrupt everyone? Because if she does, then your statement stands. But if it can be proven that she does not interrupt everyone, a superlative, then you must withdraw. I would ask for your ruling as the official chair of this committee.
I think, Ms. Thomas, to decide whether you interrupt everyone, I'm going to have to go back into the past blues and read every one of them to find out if this is true. But it is on the record, and if you like, I would withdraw the term everyone and say you often interrupt people in this committee, whether it's other members or witnesses or everyone who has something to say. If you disagree with them, you interrupt. Often you do that. This is a pattern that you have, and I don't like it because it's not in keeping with having a respectful meeting. And I'm going to state that clearly. We need to be respectful here. We need to have decorum here. We are a parliamentary committee. We're not a little group of people chatting around here and throwing stones at each other. So let's try and be respectful. So, Mr.
Sorry, point of order.
Yes.
You just said we don't throw stones at one another, but I seem to be the object to which you throw stones quite often.
Ms. Thomas, I think this is getting to be just a little bit too much. I correct anyone. I have corrected people who have interrupted everyone. I've corrected them, and each time to keep decorum in this committee. So I think it's time we go with the decorum in this committee, and I'm going to ask a question right now of this committee. Do you wish this meeting to continue, or do you wish this meeting to adjourn?
Recorded division. Recorded
All right,
division.
recorded division. Thank you. Clerk, can we record the division, please?
The question is to suspend the meeting, adjourn the meeting. Mr. Noor Mohammed.
Yes.
Monsieur Coteau.
Yes.
Ms. Latanzio.
Yes.
Ms. Gainey.
Oui.
Monsieur Serré.
Oui.
Mr. Wall.
No.
Ms. Thomas.
No.
Monsieur Gourde.
No.
Mr. Lawrence. No. Monsieur Champoux.
Oui.
Ms. Ashton.
No.
Yeas pour 6, nays contre 5.
The meeting is adjourned. Thank you. By